So, good morning, everyone. Today we'll discuss mainly about measurement of dead space volume and alveolar ventilation. So, before going to the dead space topic, so what is ventilation? It is the movement of air in and out of your respiratory tract. The movement of air in and out of your respiratory tract. We already know that 500 ml of air will go into the respiratory tract when you take inspiration, and the same 500 ml leaves the respiratory tract. So this is tidal volume. Tidal volume mainly depends on the age, sex, okay, the physical attributes of the individual mainly. In infants, it will be around 3 to 5 ml per kg body weight. Even in elderly people, mainly in old age also, this tidal volume decreases. In robust young males, this tidal volume will be highest. Even males have higher tidal volume compared to the females. Tidal volume also depends on the posture. It will be more during standing posture compared to the supine posture. Because of the abdominal contents pushing diaphragm up. So, what is this minute ventilation? So, for single breath, we are taking 500 ml, 500 ml air into our lungs. What about per minute? The amount of air which we are taking per minute will be the product of tidal volume 500 ml into the respiratory rate. That means how many breaths you are taking per minute. Respiratory rate means it includes inspiration and expiration. One respiratory cycle includes inspiration and expiration. In an average adult, inspiration and expiration both together, respiratory rate, normal respiratory will be around 12 per minute. That can be between 10 to 18, but actually we said 12 per minute. So 12 into 500 ml. So that will be 6000 or 6000 ml or 6 liter per minute. So your entire respiratory tract breathe in and breathe out 6 liters of air per minute. We call it as minute ventilation. So what is the importance of this tidal volume or minute ventilation? So now comes the concept dead space. So I am telling you 500 ml of the air enters per breath. But out of this 500 ml, only 350 ml reaches your respiratory zone. Okay, I'm being clear again. Out of this 500 ml, only 350 ml of air reaches the respiratory zone. Remaining 150 ml of air out of this tidal volume occupies the other part of the respiratory tract, mainly the upper respiratory tract and your conducting zone. This will not participate in any gas exchange. So the fraction of tidal volume that does not take part in any gas exchange, occupying mainly the upper respiratory tract and conducting airways, we call it as dead space. To be precise, we call it as anatomical dead space. So out of this 500 ml, that means 30% will not participate in the ventilation, especially out of ventilation, 30% will not participate in the exchange of gases, this carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange occurring in the alveoli. Okay, out of 500 ml, only 350 ml air takes part in this process. No, I told you already at the end of quiet expiration, your lung volume will be at FRC, functional residual capacity. In an average young adult, it will range between 2.4 to 3 liters. Okay, your functional residual capacity range from 2.4 to 3 liters, which would be at the end of expiration. So even at the end of quiet expiration, that amount of air is present in the lungs and respiratory tract. The entire respiratory tract and lungs, starting from the nose till the alveoli, this at end of quiet expiration, there will be FRC, functional residual capacity. But with every single breath, because of the pressure difference, how much pressure difference is created? The alveolar pressure will undergo -1 mm compared to the atmospheric pressure. It will reduce -1 mm. We discussed that in mechanics of breathing. So because of this -1 mm pressure, PB minus PA minus 1, PA PB minus PA becoming -1. 500 ml of air enters your respiratory tract. Okay, above FRC is already there. Okay, along with that 500 ml of air will enter. In this 500 ml of air, 150 ml of air occupies the nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx. Okay, this constitute your upper respiratory tract and the conducting zone, trachea, bronchi, all 10 generations of bronchi, and from 11th generation bronchiole to 17th generation bronchiole. Okay, 11th to 16th generation bronchiole, that is terminal bronchiole. So from 17th onwards will be your respiratory bronchiole, to which alveolar ducts are attached and alveoli are attached. So up to the 16th generation, the conducting zone and the upper respiratory tract, the air amount will be around 150 ml out of 30% of your tidal volume. So remaining 350 ml will occupy from the respiratory bronchiole onwards. So 350 ml of air occupies this respiratory zone where gases exchange occurs. That includes respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts and alveolar sacs. The remaining 150 ml occupies the conducting zone and the upper respiratory tract. Here the gas will not take part in exchange of gases, mainly oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. So we call this space as anatomical dead space. So that is around 150 ml. Then what is physiological dead space? Sometimes some alveoli are non-functional, whether it is because of the obstruction or else it can be because of the reduced ventilation or else reduced blood supply. Some alveoli will not take part in the gas exchange. So we call it as alveolar dead space. The dead space means the gas in this space is not used in gas exchange. So from the nose till the terminal bronchiole, that is anatomical dead space, and some of the alveoli, if they are non-functional or else their blood supply is less, they will constitute the alveolar dead space. So physiological dead space or total dead space. Physiological dead space is also known as total dead space. It includes the anatomical dead space, okay, which does not take part in gas exchange, that is upper respiratory tract and conducting zone from trachea to terminal bronchiole, and the non-functional alveoli or else non-perfused reduced blood supply alveoli, that includes alveolar dead space. So in normal healthy adults, physiological dead space or total dead space will be equal to anatomical dead space. This will be very minimum. Only in pathological states this alveolar dead space increases, reducing the air available for gas exchange. How to measure this dead space? So there are three systems how we will measure. One is Radford's formula, that is simple prediction that anatomical dead space of an individual will be equal to the weight in pounds. That means 70 kg individual, that means around he weighs around 150 pounds. 70 kg is 150 pounds. His dead space will be 150 ml. As the weight increases, the anatomical dead space increases. And second important technique is single breath carbon dioxide and nitrogen techniques. Another method is single breath carbon dioxide technique and nitrogen technique. What is the single breath carbon dioxide technique? Here we don't use any external gases. I will tell you one concept, okay, derivation of an equation. So when we are breathing air, we are taking the atmospheric air. Atmospheric air practically has zero partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Okay, in the atmosphere, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is in decimals. And when we expire the air, the tidal volume which we are expiring contains carbon dioxide. Around 38 millimeters of partial pressure carbon dioxide is present in this expired air. Where this carbon dioxide is coming? This carbon dioxide is coming entirely from the alveoli. Into the alveoli, from where this carbon dioxide is coming. The carbon dioxide in your body metabolism, especially glucose metabolism. Glucose undergoes glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Utilizing oxygen, the waste products will be your carbon dioxide and water. Not only that, in acid base physiology, we studied that any acids, when they neutralize, they will be converted to carbon dioxide and lungs will remove that carbon So the alveoli carbon dioxide entirely comes from your body carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide in your alveoli or else the carbon dioxide in your expired air comes entirely, it is produced entirely in the body. And carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is negligible. So same equation we will take, mass is constant. So mass of the carbon dioxide in expired air is equal to mass of the carbon dioxide in inspired air and mass of the carbon dioxide in alveolar, right? The expired air carbon dioxide is mainly produced from the alveoli. It can also include carbon dioxide coming from the inspired air. But because the partial pressure is zero, practically carbon dioxide in inspired air is negligible. If you substitute in this formula, the mass of carbon dioxide in expired air is coming entirely from mass of carbon dioxide from alveoli. If you remember concentration of a substance or a pressure of gas, you can calculate from the mass divided by volume. This we already know from intermediate. So in this formula we will substitute here. So mass of carbon dioxide in expired air is equal to volume of carbon dioxide expired, or else volume of air expired, volume of this expired air into partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the expired air. It is the volume of expired air into partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the expired air. This is not simple alone volume of carbon dioxide, it is volume of air and partial pressure. Okay, here you also should apply the your Dalton's law. Same thing, the gas which is exerting the pressures is equal to the sum of partial pressures. So similarly, so this is equal to mass of carbon dioxide, entirely carbon dioxide is produced from alveoli, that is equal to volume of air in the alveoli into partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli. So now what is this volume of air expired? That is nothing but your tidal volume, right? Volume of air expired is nothing but your tidal volume. So volume of air expired, tidal volume, into the partial pressure. Here we are talking about individual partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and into partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveolar air. So what is tidal volume? Tidal volume includes alveolar volume along with the dead space volume. So if you substitute this formula again here, so alveolar volume we can substitute Vt minus Vd. So we will get Bohr's equation. What you are supposed to calculate in Bohr's equation? Simply remember the Bohr's equation, where you need tidal volume, partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the, so to calculate dead space, the formula is partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli minus partial pressure of carbon dioxide in expired air into volume of air expired, that is tidal volume, divided by partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli. This is the derivation for that formula, Bohr's equation. This is the actual Bohr's equation. This you can measure by gas analyzer. Expired air sample you will take, you can measure the partial pressure in gas analyzer. You can measure the tidal volume by using your spirometer. What about the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli? So out of this 500 ml, the last 10 ml of air is coming exclusively from alveoli, right? Even the last 300 ml out of this 500 ml, 300 ml has to come from alveoli, but last 10 ml has to exclusively exit your alveoli. So that 10 ml you take, you run it through gas analyzer, you will get the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Substitute in this formula, you will get dead space volume. Okay, remember this formula. This is important for your exam. Okay, if you have these values, you can calculate dead space. Okay, the dead space which you will get will be equal to your total dead space volume. That is single breath carbon dioxide technique. There is another technique, single breath nitrogen technique. Okay, you connect a subject to spirometer. You ask the subject to take inspiration of normal air up to the mid inspiration. Then you will ask the subject to breathe in pure oxygen. You ask the subject to breathe in pure oxygen. So when a subject breathes normal air up to mid inspiration, slowly normal air is going, and you connected the subject nose to oxygen cylinder and you ask him to breathe pure oxygen. So what happens? The last air which is entering is pure oxygen and it occupies the dead space, right? It occupies the dead space from here to here. And the initial air is in the alveoli. Initial air is in the alveoli. Some amount of air mixes, okay, the oxygen and air mixes at this junction, at the dead space alveolar junction. So the last air which he is breathing from the mid inspiration, if he takes pure oxygen, the most of the dead space is occupied by the oxygen, and that first part of air entered the respiratory zone and there is some amount of mixture here. Now you will ask the subject to exhale the air. So when the subject exhales the air, you simply measure the nitrogen content of the air. Okay, nitrogen is present in normal air but not in pure oxygen. So the first volume of air that is coming out from here to here does not practically contain any nitrogen. It is the pure oxygen which he inhaled at the end of in the previous experiment. At the end he inhaled pure oxygen, so only oxygen will leave. So this is phase 1 and slowly the nitrogen starts appearing in the expiring air. Okay, so it will be a steep line. From there again the air contains nitrogen, that is phase 3. Again there is increase in steep. This blue line indicates the nitrogen presence in the air that is coming out of the lungs of the subject. We will ask him to exhale till residual volume, up to the residual volume, that is the maximum expiration he can do. So the first phase contains pure oxygen. This comes under dead space. At the same time there is some mixture, okay, some mixture of nitrogen between the alveolar air and the dead space air. So that slowly increases. If you half this curve, okay, half this curve, there is one half here, another half here. This half you can consider as dead space, okay, because of the mixture, equal mixture on both sides. If you divide it by half, you can simply measure the phase 1 plus half of the phase 2 will give you dead space volume. Now you can see, then completely from the respiratory zone the nitrogen which he inspired before is coming out in the air. So from closing volume, okay, there is a volume called closing volume at the end of phase 3 where there will be again steep rise in the nitrogen content. What is this closing volume? This is the volume above residual volume where smaller airways in the lower parts of the lung collapse. Okay, it is the volume at which smaller airways at the lower part of the lung collapse. That means from phase 3 to phase 4, this steep increase is because of the air coming from the upper parts of the lung which were well ventilated, okay, which has less participation in the gas exchange, which contain the nitrogen contents from the previous functional residual capacities. This you will understand clearly when we discuss about the ventilation perfusion ratios. From this diagram you should know closing volume, that is closing volume is the volume of lungs above residual volume. That means it is somewhere in between the functional residual capacity and residual volume, where the lower parts of the lower respiratory tract is collapsed, lower airways are collapsed, and the phase 4 air mainly contains the nitrogen coming from the upper airways. That's why again there is steep increase in the nitrogen content up to residual volume. Below residual volume he cannot exhale. So the last 1.2 liters is residual volume. The total lung capacity is 6 liters. So from the mid inspiration he took oxygen, he breathed up to his maximum capacity, then he slowly started exhaling. We measured the nitrogen content. Initially the air coming out of the dead space, because it contains pure oxygen, there is no nitrogen content. Slowly nitrogen content increases. This is the mixed dead space and alveolar air. You half this, add phase 1 and half of the phase 2, you will get the dead space. The phase 3 contains pure respiratory zone nitrogen, and phase 4 contains the nitrogen coming out of your upper airways, upper alveoli in the lungs. So this is simply draw a line and measure, or else you can same method you can construct this, measure the area will also give you the dead space volume. This is planimetry method because your textbook mentioned two methods. One is directly drawing an equivalent line, and the second thing is by drawing a plane and calculating the area. By both techniques you can see the phase 1 contains 100 ml pure oxygen is coming, and next 100 ml half of the volume, that is 50 ml, is again dead space air. So total 100 plus 50 150 ml. So your dead space volume is the gas expired in phase 1 and mid up to the mid portion of phase 2. So this is dead space. In which conditions dead space increases? Anatomical dead space is 150 ml, that means from the nose till your conducting zone, that we should remember. If alveoli are not functional or else they are under perfused, there will be increase in alveolar dead space, increasing total physiological dead space. Okay, total physiological dead space. Now what is this alveolar ventilation? So it is the volume of air that actually reaches alveoli per minute. So out of tidal volume around 350 ml air is reaching the alveoli. So 500 minus 150, that is dead space air, is 350 ml out of the tidal volume is reaching into respiratory rate per minute, give you alveolar ventilation. So that means this is minute respiratory volume is 6 liter per minute. Out of 6 liter per minute, 4200 ml is reaching the alveoli. So what is the importance? This is the air entering the alveoli, air that is in the alveolar ventilation. This 4200 ml of air is the air that is taking part in gas exchange. 4200 ml, that is, if we talk about tidal volume, 350 ml of the air is the air that take part in the gas exchange. The 150 ml is dead space air that does not take part. So because in the absence of lung diseases, anatomical dead space volume, if the anatomical dead space volume increases, alveolar ventilation decreases. In there is no lung disease, even in normal subject, if the dead space volume increases, the alveolar ventilation decreases. This we will see in patient on mechanical ventilator because of the excess tubings. Okay, this tubings increases the alveolar anatomical dead space, thereby reducing the alveolar ventilation. So instead of 150 ml dead space volume, because of the ventilator tubings, it may increase up to 200 or 250 ml. So out of tidal volume 500 ml, if 250 ml is dead space, the amount of air reaching alveoli will be 250 ml. So if you calculate per minute from 4200 ml, it will go down. It will go down. So the significance is types of breathing. What happens in rapid shallow breathing and what happens in slow deep breathing? In rapid shallow breathing, the alveolar ventilation is grossly impaired. Rapid means the respiratory rate increases, but the depth of respiration, that means the tidal volume, amount of air the subject is taking, decreases. So this leads to hypoxia and hypercapnia. Hypoxia is nothing but reduced oxygen content of blood. Hypercapnia is increased carbon dioxide content of blood. But deep and slow breathing, that means if the person is taking more tidal volume, even though respiratory rate is that, slowly he is taking deep breaths, this increases the alveolar ventilation. So to improve alveolar ventilation, if you want to increase the air supply more and more to alveoli, you have to increase the depth of respiration compared to the rate of respiration. If I show you this diagram, you will understand. So when a person takes rapid shallow breathing, rapid means increase in respiratory rate. Like normal respiratory rate is 12 and subject took 30 breaths per minute. What happens to the tidal volume? Tidal volume will be less because shallow. There won't be much time to take 500 ml. The tidal volume reduces. So what happens to the minute volume? So tidal volume into respiratory rate, 200 into 30. It is 6 liters. Okay, minute volume is not changing. Even in normal subject, respiratory rate is 12, tidal volume is 500, minute volume is 6 liters. But when a subject takes rapid shallow breathing, let's say 30 ml per minute, his tidal volume will be less. Okay, it is not possible to take rapid deep breathing. Okay, it is not possible that thing. We have the limitation. We can take rapid shallow breaths. So minute volume is 6 liters, but out of this 6 liters, that means out of this 200 ml tidal volume, anatomical dead space is always 150 ml. So 200 minus 150, only 50 ml of the tidal volume is reaching the alveoli. So per minute alveolar ventilation is 200 minus 150 into 30, that is 1500 ml air is reaching the alveoli. Normally alveolar ventilation at the rate of 12 breaths per minute and 500 ml tidal volume is 4200 ml. If a person takes slow deep breaths, okay, slow deep breaths, respiratory rate will be less, okay, because it's taking slow breathing. It will be 10 per minute. Because of the deep breathing, tidal volume will be 600 ml instead of 500 ml. But the minute volume will be same, 6 liters. So how much air is reaching the alveoli? 600 minus dead space volume 150. That means around 350. Sorry, around 450 into 10. That is 4500 ml. Okay. So that's why when a person takes slow deep breathing, the alveolar ventilation is more than a person taking rapid shallow breathing. Where do you see this? Why this is very, very important is especially when a patient is recovering from anesthesia, uh, because of so much time in anesthesia and respiratory center depression, because of the buildup of gases, he will initially take rapid shallow breaths. But you should advise him to take slow deep breathing rather than the rapid shallow breaths. The subject should voluntarily take deep breathing so that he will increase the alveolar ventilation. If alveolar ventilation is less, gas exchange will be impaired, leading to hypoxia and hypercapnia. So trained athletes, they will have increased depth of respiration, so they will have more tidal volume. Similarly, trained athletes will have increased stroke volume. Compared to heart rate, they will increase stroke volume. Similarly, their respiratory depth increases, increasing the tidal volume. So this increases overall alveolar ventilation. Because of the increase in stroke volume, there will be increase in overall cardiac output. This you see under in trained athletes. So how to measure? Simple. You can measure the expired air carbon dioxide per minute that originates completely from the alveoli. So alveolar ventilation reflects, I will show you this formula. Same Bohr's equation. Here if you don't substitute anything, you can get the amount of alveolar air. This is the volume of air in alveoli. That you divide this equation by partial pressure of carbon dioxide, you will get the alveolar air. Okay, when I am mentioning this CO2, don't think that this is the CO2 volume. It is the entire air volume. But because we are talking in the terms of CO2, I mentioned here CO2. Same goes for dead space also. So the amount of air, amount of carbon dioxide in the expired air completely comes from your alveolar air. So that means if you measure the expired air tidal volume, we will have partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in expired air, last 10 ml air. If you run through gas analyzer, you will have that, and partial pressure of alveolar, sorry, this PeCO2, normally expired air you will measure, PaCO2, last 10 ml of the air carbon dioxide partial pressure. You substitute these values, you can directly get the volume of alveoli, or else you can indirectly calculate from the tidal volume minus dead space volume. So alveolar ventilation reflects the alveolar CO2 levels. Not only alveolar CO2 levels, it reflects the arterial CO2 partial pressures. That means if ventilation increases, especially alveolar ventilation increases, more and more carbon dioxide is expired in your air. So the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in your blood decreases. Okay? If ventilatory rate increases, ventilation increases, more and more carbon dioxide is washed away from your alveoli. Thereby, when it is washed away from alveoli, carbon dioxide from the pulmonary blood shifts to alveoli, and this again will be washed out. If the alveolar ventilation decreases, then the alveolar carbon dioxide levels increase. Carbon dioxide will be accumulated in the alveoli. Similarly, carbon dioxide in the pulmonary blood increases. So ventilation has inversely proportional relationship with the carbon dioxide partial pressures of both alveoli and also in the blood. So what happens during hypoventilation? That means reduced ventilation, where you see these two things: central hypoventilation and peripheral hypoventilation. Central hypoventilation, it can be because of the depression of respiratory centers, your pontine and medullary respiratory centers. This we also see under your regulation of respiration. When these respiratory centers are depressed, that means the inspiratory signals going to your muscles decreases. The rate of the signals going to your muscles decreases. This causes central hypoventilation. Any diseases affecting the respiratory centers. When there is failure of the ventilatory apparatus, that will give you the peripheral hypoventilation. Your respiratory apparatus, that means the muscles, okay, expanding the chest wall, it is not working properly, then it leads to peripheral hypoventilation. Cause is in the peripheral musculature. So where we see this alveolar hypoventilation, that means reduced in and outflow of air into the alveoli, mainly when the chronic lung diseases exacerbate. That means they aggravate, like asthma, bronchitis, emphysema. This we already know. In asthma, because of the collapse of airways, especially during expiration, increase in airway resistance. Even in chronic bronchitis, there will be increase in airway resistance. Emphysema, because of the excess increase in compliance, and prolonged COPD, which also increases airway resistance. That reason is because of the inflammation of the airways. Whatever might be the reason, in these conditions, the air entering the alveoli decreases. Especially, you can say obstructive lung diseases, the air entering and leaving alveoli decreases. And when the respiratory centers are depressed, this occurs mainly post anesthesia, or else when they take drugs like barbiturates. Okay, phenobarbital, okay, is an important drug. Phenobarbital, barbiturates, opiates, morphine drugs. Okay, these drugs, barbiturates and opiates, they are CNS depressing drugs. Okay, CNS depressing drugs. We give them for mainly barbiturates. We give for epilepsy, to treat seizures, to reduce the nervous activity, but it has side effect on the depression of respiratory center. Similarly, opiates, morphine, centrally acting painkillers, they also have side effect depression of the respiratory center. In these conditions, there will be hypoventilation. Okay, here central hypoventilation, here peripheral hypoventilation. And other neuromuscular disorders like paralysis of the respiratory muscles, whether it is paralysis, complete loss of action like in poliomyelitis, or else paresis, weakness of the respiratory muscles like in myasthenia gravis, tetanus. Tetanus will be spasticity, okay? There will be spastic or rigid muscles in tetanus. Poliomyelitis, it is a lower motor neuron disorder where the muscles are paralyzed. This is a lower motor neuron disorder. Okay, myasthenia gravis, this you already know, autoimmune disorder affecting the muscles, especially your acetylcholine receptors. In all these conditions, if polio, myasthenia gravis, tetanus, when it affects the respiratory muscles, respiratory movements will be impaired, ventilation will be reduced. This is also one of the important cause of peripheral hypoventilation. In hypoventilation, what happens? Air reaching the alveoli decreases. So that means air available for the exchange of gases decreases. So slowly the oxygen levels in the blood decrease, that is known as hypoxia, and carbon dioxide levels in the blood increases because oxygen is not supplied to blood and carbon dioxide is not removed from the blood, leads to hypoxia and hypercapnia. Hyperventilation, this is opposite to hypoventilation, increase in the respiratory rate. This occurs when you stimulate the respiratory centers more, or else you can voluntarily hyperventilate. Okay, there is one type of pranayama, okay, that is known as kapalabhati pranayama, where they voluntarily hyperventilate, which is not good for your body. Voluntary hyperventilation leads to rapid shallow breathing, reducing your alveolar ventilation. So You should not do voluntary hyperventilation. Sometimes in high altitudes, when you go to mountain ranges, because of the reduced oxygen tension in the atmospheric air, your respiratory centers will be stimulated, causing causing the hyperventilation. Mainly during high altitudes, when you go from sea level to the high altitudes, you will experience hyperventilation. So hyperventilation, because ventilation has inversely proportional relation to the alveolar and arterial carbon dioxide. In hyperventilation, excess carbon dioxide is removed. When excess carbon dioxide is removed from the alveolus and blood, what happens to the blood pH? Increases. This is one of the reason of acute respiratory alkalosis. Acute respiratory alkalosis mainly you will see when you go to higher altitudes, where because of low oxygen tension there is increased stimulation of respiration, so leading to hyperventilation, washing out carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is removed. You remember that diagram, the diagram CO2 plus H2O is equal to bicarbonic acid and H plus CO3 minus. When this is removed, the equation shifts to the left, reducing H plus levels, increasing the pH, leading to respiratory alkalosis. So, okay, this finishes our dead space and alveolar ventilation. In the next class, we will discuss about gas exchange in the lungs. Thank you. Go through your textbooks. We'll discuss in the next class.